After decades of emerging as a significant economic force in Africa, South Africa may be at risk of losing regional leadership in digital development. This according to international telecommunications body GSMA. Business writer for Business Day Mudiwa Gavaza joins us now to look into indications that SA is trailing behind in some areas of digital development. Thank you so much for your time, Mudiwa. Is this a case of South Africa remaining stagnant in the digital sphere, or maybe just other African countries accelerating at a faster pace in that effort?
Good day, Zinati. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to something like this, but the key issue is just policy formation versus policy implementation. South Africa is famous for crafting really good policies, but the implementation sometimes leaves, something to be desired at times. We see this in a number of different sectors. When it comes to technology specifically, what the GSMA is just warning is that there is a lag in the way that government is going about implementing some of the policies that have actually been formed out there and actually making them, happen online, including something like the Digital Master Plan, which is meant to be, the country's North Star, when it comes to what's actually going to happen. If you think about just how much wealth has been created in the United States, for example, just from what people call the Magnificent Seven, which are basically all technology-backed companies. In South Africa, we have a version of that in Naspers, but imagine if we had, multiple of these huge tech companies that are adding, to the GDP of the country.
Well, okay, interesting that you point to the fact that, it's about policy implementation. And is this really the main hindrance when it comes to investment then into the tech sector? Because you know that nothing moves without investment.
So there's a couple of ways that you could slice that up. If you look at GSMA, for example, GSMA is the global telecoms body. So in this particular case, they lean on the fact that in the technology sector, one of your biggest investors is your mobile operators, right?
Yeah.
And in South Africa, we know that infamously or famously, MTN and Vodacom, for example, have been spending on average of 10 billion rand, each one of them, on infrastructure in that country. And that shows no pace of, slowing down. They, just continue to do so. That's one element of investment. Another one, which is a separate data point that comes from, let's say, your Southern African Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, otherwise known as SAVCA, they show that when it comes to the other end of the spectrum, your mobile operators are mature businesses, but on the other side of the spectrum, on the startup side, they actually show that South Africa is being outpaced by the likes of Nigeria and Kenya when it comes to attracting investment for those startup businesses. So these are all the little things that the GSMA is actually pointing out to, and a number of other bodies, to say that where South Africa is seen as being the economic powerhouse of Africa, when it comes to tech, there's a threat that you have these other regions, especially Nigeria and Kenya, that are currently, pushing, far ahead on that front. And if the country isn't careful, then it's likely that, South Africa then gets left behind and has a lot of catching up to do.
With that, the implications then of South Africa's digital edge, softening, does that also then means that it filters through down to that there might be a slowing down of the narrowing of the digital divide as one of the implications of that?
I think what it points to more than anything else is leadership in the space. And you could look at leadership in a number of ways, but South Africa is the most advanced economy in Africa when it comes to infrastructure, financial services, so many different sectors, industries, and ways that you can, place that out. Digital inclusion, you're likely going to get a better print in South Africa than
Yeah.
you are in many of the parts of
Okay.
Africa, because you've got a lot of developed systems. And I mean, Vodacom, for example, was telling us on Monday about a program that they have where a person can buy a smartphone and be paying it off little by little, day by day, because access to devices tends to be one of the big places that keeps a lot of people out of the digital economy. What worries a person like me is more about the wealth creation that comes from technology. Yes, you can have a huge swath of your population having the smartphones, having the connectivity, having access, right? But when it comes to actual technology investment and, the real benefits thereof, then right now that's where I think South Africa might end up being at risk of lagging behind. That wealth creation, that ability to create another Naspers, another MTN, another Vodacom. Like, we need to be, spurring that on. And when you hear of the unicorns, these billion-dollar startups, for
Yep.
example, that are, mushrooming in a place like Nigeria, then it speaks to, the point that I'm trying to make. Advanced economy, but what ownership do you have over the technology and the platforms? Because you end up having a very advanced digital economy, but will it be an advanced digital economy where the people of the country have equity, have ownership in those platforms, or do you continue being consumers of other people's technology?
All right. Mudiwa, just lastly, as we wrap up the conversation, what are some of the key recommendations that the GSMA has put up for South Africa?
So there's a lot that they, point at, and they actually, just a couple of big stats. They say that right now your mobile operators, had about 120 billion rand of revenue in 2023, meaning that they made up 58% of the total telecom sector. And then they also mentioned the fact that, just the revenues that come from telecommunications when it comes to digital piece. That's 200 billion rand a year, or 4 to 6% of GDP. To boost this, they say support for digital adoption through revising tax on imported devices and accelerating digital skills training. We spoke about that. And then implementation of the digital master plan and other components for the sector. And then lastly, the one that I thought was interesting was reform for sector regulatory reform framework to support growth in the digital economy. That's including a level playing field and collaborative approach for newer technologies, such as over-the-top players, your Netflixes, your YouTubes, low Earth orbit satellites. Starlink is a big thing. And then obviously artificial intelligence. And lastly, you've got cloud computing.
All right. Well, thank you so much for giving us insights on that, Mudiwa. Much appreciated. That was Mudiwa Gavaza, business writer for Business Day.